Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive alien fleet materialize through hyperspace jumps. Thousands of ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest space stations, filled the void around humanity's home system. The enemy vessels gleamed with an otherworldly beauty that made them no less terrifying. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies," Communications Officer Martinez reported, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Put it through." "Lieutenant." The main screen flickered, revealing a creature that defied easy description. Its elongated skull housed multiple eyes that shifted between colors, while tentacle-like appendages writhed where a mouth should be. When it spoke, the words came through perfect translation software, cold and emotionless. "Primitive species of the third planet. I am High Arbiter Zalthek of the Galactic Dominion. Your solar system has been marked for integration into our empire. You will surrender your military assets, submit to our authority, and provide tribute as demanded. Resistance is futile. You have one solar rotation to comply." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Chen felt the weight of every eye on her. From the youngest ensign to her most experienced officers, Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of barely 300 ships, most of them outdated by galactic standards. The aliens had brought enough firepower to glass entire worlds. "Admiral," whispered her tactical officer, "our sensors are detecting energy signatures we've never seen before. Their smallest ships are reading as more powerful than our dreadnoughts." Chen nodded grimly. Humanity had always known this day might come. Ever since first contact with the galactic community 50 years ago, Earth had been treated as a backwater curiosity. The major powers had ignored them, dismissed their technology as primitive, their military as insignificant. Now someone had decided Earth was worth conquering. "Send a message to Earth Command," Chen ordered. "Tell them the Dominion fleet has arrived. Recommend immediate activation of Project Nightfall." Her executive officer, Commander Harrison, stepped closer. "Ma'am, are you certain? Once we activate Nightfall, there's no going back. The rest of the galaxy will never see us the same way again." Chen studied the alien fleet through the view screen. Ships the size of cities hung in space like predatory birds, their weapons already charging for the bombardment that would follow humanity's inevitable refusal. She thought of her daughter back on Earth, probably in school right now, unaware that her world balanced on the edge of extinction. "Commander, patch me through to the Dominion flagship." "Ma'am." "Do it." The alien appeared on screen again, its multiple eyes focusing on her with what might have been amusement. "The local defense commander, I presume. Have you come to surrender your pathetic fleet?" "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy. I'm here to deliver humanity's response to your demands." "Speak quickly, primitive." "My patience grows thin." Chen straightened in her command chair. "The people of Earth have considered your offer carefully. Our response is as follows: go to hell." The alien's eyes flashed crimson. "Foolish. Your species will serve as an example to others who would dare defy the Dominion. Prepare to witness the price of resistance." The transmission ended. Almost immediately, the Dominion fleet began moving into attack formation. Chen watched them approach, counting down the minutes until her homeworld's defenses would be overwhelmed. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Humanity had spent decades preparing for this moment, building something the galaxy had never seen before. "Ma'am, we're receiving confirmation from Earth Command," Martinez announced. "Project Nightfall is authorized. All Black Armada assets are being activated." Chen smiled for the first time since the aliens arrived. "Then let's show these bastards what happens when you threaten humanity's children." The space around Earth began to shimmer. What the Dominion had mistaken for empty void suddenly revealed itself as something far more dangerous. Massive shapes uncloaked throughout the system, their hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The Black Armada had been hiding in plain sight for 20 years, waiting for exactly this moment. Ships emerged from the shadows between planets, from asteroid fields that had been hollow all along, from what appeared to be empty space itself. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering, designed not for exploration or trade but for one purpose: war. Their hulls were matte black, drinking in starlight and sensor beams alike. No running lights marked their positions, no bright colors announced their presence. They were predators built for the deep dark between stars. The Dominion fleet suddenly found themselves outnumbered 3-1. But numbers weren't what made the alien commander's eyes widen with something approaching fear. It was the technology readings his sensors were providing. The human ships weren't just numerous, they were impossible. "Admiral," reported the tactical officer aboard the Dominion flagship, "the human vessels are showing energy signatures that exceed our theoretical maximums. Their shield harmonics are unlike anything in our databases. And their weapons?" "What about their weapons?" Zalthek demanded. "Sir, they're not showing any weapons at all. But that's impossible. These are clearly military vessels." On the bridge of the Defiance, Chen opened a channel to the entire Black Armada. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Today we teach the galaxy a lesson they'll never forget. Humanity doesn't kneel. Humanity doesn't surrender. And humanity sure as hell doesn't let aliens threaten our children. All ships, you are weapons-free. Show them what we've built in the dark." The response came not in words, but in action. 5,000 ships of the Black Armada moved as one, accelerating toward the Dominion fleet with impossible speed. Their hulls began to glow, not with lights, but with something far more dangerous. Energy patterns humanity had discovered in the depths of their own solar system. Power sources the galaxy had declared theoretically impossible. As the two fleets closed the distance, Chen allowed herself one last look at Earth through the view screen. Blue and beautiful, unmarked by war, protected by children who had grown up to become humanity's sword and shield. The Dominion had demanded submission from the wrong species. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had earned their place among the stars not through diplomacy or trade, but through the one thing they did better than any other species: survive at any cost. High Arbiter Zalthek watched his tactical displays with growing confusion as the human fleet approached. His intelligence reports had been clear. Earth possessed primitive kinetic weapons, basic energy shields, and fusion reactors that barely qualified as spacefaring technology. The vessels now bearing down on his forces defied every assumption the Dominion had made about human capabilities. "Analysis complete. High Arbiter," his science officer reported, mandibles clicking nervously. "The human ships are powered by controlled singularities. Each vessel carries what appears to be a miniature black hole in perfect containment." Zalthek's tentacles writhed in disbelief. "Impossible. Singularity manipulation requires technology levels far beyond this species' capabilities. Our own scientists have only theoretical models for such power sources." "Sir, that's not the disturbing part. Our sensors are detecting weapon systems that shouldn't exist. They appear to be channeling dark energy itself." Before Zalthek could respond, the human fleet opened fire. But instead of the expected particle beams or missile volleys, space itself seemed to twist around the Dominion ships. Reality warped and bent as weapons that humanity had built from their understanding of the universe's hidden forces tore through shields. Designed to stop conventional attacks, the first Dominion destroyer simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but edited out of reality as if it had never been there. The second ship found its hull aging 1,000,000 years in seconds, metal sublimating into cosmic dust. A third vessel watched in horror as its own weapons turned against it. The ship's targeting systems convinced that it was facing a mirror. Captain Rodriguez of the UES Reaper felt the familiar vibration through his ship's hull as the dark energy cannons fired. His crew worked with quiet efficiency, targeting Dominion vessels with weapons that bent the fundamental forces of the universe to humanity's will. The aliens had expected a conventional battle. Instead, they faced an enemy that had learned to weaponize physics itself. "Target the command ship next," Rodriguez ordered. "Let's show their leader what happens when you threaten Earth." The Reaper's main weapon, a device that created localized time distortions, locked onto the Dominion flagship. Space around the massive vessel began to slow, then accelerate, then slow again as temporal shears tore through its hull. The ship's armor, designed to withstand conventional assault, had no defense against attacks that occurred outside normal time. Aboard the flagship, Zalthek felt his ship shuddering under impossible stresses. "Retreat!" he ordered. "All ships fall back to minimum safe distance. We need to reassess the situation." But the human fleet didn't allow retreat. Ships that had seemed impossibly fast before now moved like living shadows, using technology that folded space itself to appear wherever they chose. Dominion vessels found themselves surrounded, cut off, facing enemies that could attack from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Commander Lisa Park, commanding the stealth destroyer UES Phantom, smiled as her ship materialized inside a Dominion formation. Her vessel had been built using principles learned from studying the space between atoms. existing in the quantum foam that underlies reality. To most sensors, the phantom simply wasn't there until she chose to be. "Fire the quantum disruptor," she ordered. The Dominion cruiser beside them discovered that its atoms no longer wanted to remain bonded together. The ship came apart at the molecular level, its crew never understanding what had killed them. The phantom vanished again, moving through dimensions the Dominion couldn't even detect. High Arbiter Zaltek watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by weapons that violated everything he understood about warfare. The humans weren't just winning. They were demonstrating technology that surpassed the Dominion's greatest achievements. How had a primitive species developed such capabilities in secret? "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human commander," his communications officer announced. Admiral Chen appeared on screen, her expression calm despite the battle raging around them. Behind her, tactical displays showed Dominion ships being eliminated with surgical precision. "High Arbiter, I believe you wanted to discuss terms of surrender?" Zalthek's eyes flashed with rage. "Your tricks may have caught us unprepared, but the Dominion has resources beyond your imagination." "This is merely one fleet among thousands." "You're right," Chen agreed. "This is just one fleet. But you made a critical error in your intelligence gathering. You assumed we were alone." The space around the battle suddenly filled with new contacts. Ships emerged from hyperspace with the unmistakable energy signatures of human technology. But their designs were different. These vessels bore the markings of species the Dominion had conquered decades ago. "Allow me to introduce the Free Coalition," Chen continued. "Turns out when you've been selling primitive human technology to underground resistance movements for 30 years, you make a lot of friends. Friends who've been very busy building their own black armadas." Zaltek watched in growing horror as rebel fleets from a dozen conquered worlds appeared throughout his territory, ships powered by human singularity cores, armed with weapons that humanity had shared with anyone willing to fight for freedom. The intelligence reports had been catastrophically wrong. Humanity hadn't been primitive. They'd been preparing. "The galaxy has been ruled by fear for too long," Chen said. "Today that ends. Every species you've enslaved, every world you've conquered, every life you've destroyed, they all have friends now. And humanity keeps its promises to its friends." The battle turned into a rout. Dominion ships caught between the human fleet and the coalition forces found themselves overwhelmed by technology they couldn't comprehend and tactics they couldn't counter. Vessels that had terrorized entire star systems were reduced to drifting hulks by weapons that turned their own strengths against them. Captain Sarah Kim, commanding the experimental vessel UES Paradox, engaged 3 Dominion battleships simultaneously. Her ship existed in a state of controlled quantum superposition, occupying multiple positions at once until the moment she chose to collapse the wave function. To the enemy, she was everywhere and nowhere, impossible to target effectively. "Lock onto their command frequencies," she ordered. "Time to demonstrate the neural disruptor." The weapon that followed was perhaps the most disturbing in humanity's arsenal. Instead of destroying ships, it attacked the minds of their crews, inducing overwhelming despair and hopelessness. The Dominion commanders found themselves questioning everything they believed, wondering why they were fighting for an empire that cared nothing for their lives. One by one, Dominion ships began surrendering. Their crews, faced with technology that seemed like magic and weapons that attacked their very souls, lost the will to continue. The empire that had conquered half the galaxy was being defeated by the species they had dismissed as irrelevant. High Arbiter Zaltek, his flagship crippled and his fleet in tatters, finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. Humanity hadn't been hiding their primitive nature. They'd been hiding their true capabilities. While the galaxy fought with conventional weapons and traditional tactics, humans had been learning to break the rules entirely. The species that would kneel before no one had just announced their presence to the universe. And the galaxy would never be the same. News of the Dominion's defeat at Earth spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. On conquered worlds across 1,000 star systems, enslaved populations looked up at their alien overlords with new hope burning in their eyes. The impossible had happened. Someone had not only resisted the Dominion, they had crushed them utterly. On the prison world of Kepler 442b, the Thrani resistance leader Kextal received the coded transmission with trembling claws. For generations, his people had been forced to mine rare minerals for their Dominion masters, their children taken as slaves, their culture slowly erased. Now hidden in deep caves beneath the planet's surface, he gathered his fellow rebels to share the most important news in their species' history. "Brothers and sisters," Kextal whispered, his reptilian features illuminated by the glow of contraband human communication devices. "The humans have kept their promise. The Black Armada has shown itself. The time for liberation has come." Around him, dozens of Thrani fighters checked weapons that had been smuggled to them piece by piece over decades. Human technology, disguised as mining equipment reassembled in secret. Singularity power cells that could level mountains. Quantum disruptors that could tear through Dominion armor like paper. Cloaking devices that made their ships invisible to enemy sensors. Kextal activated the planet-wide resistance network. Similar scenes played out across hundreds of worlds as species that had been enslaved for generations prepared to strike back. The humans hadn't just given them weapons. They had given them hope and taught them that even the mightiest empire could fall. Meanwhile, in the heart of Dominion space, Supreme Overlord Vashti emergency convened the ruling council. The massive chamber on the capital world of Nexus Prime had witnessed the conquest of countless civilizations, but never had it hosted a meeting quite like this one. The most powerful beings in the galaxy faced a crisis that threatened their very existence. "Explain to me," Vashti rumbled, his massive frame towering over the assembled counselors, "how a primitive species armed with fusion reactors and kinetic weapons destroyed High Arbiter Zaltek's entire fleet." The intelligence director, a spindly creature called Nethral, projected holographic displays showing the battle's aftermath. "Supreme Overlord, our initial assessments were incomplete. The humans appear to have been concealing their true technological capabilities for decades. Their weapons operate on principles we don't fully understand." "Impossible," snarled War Marshal Gorthex. "No species develops singularity manipulation without our knowledge. Our spy networks monitor every major scientific breakthrough in the galaxy." Nethral's tentacles quivered nervously. "That's just it, Marshal. They didn't develop this technology recently. Analysis of the battle footage suggests they've had these capabilities for at least 30 years. They've been planning this for generations." The implication struck the Council like a physical blow. For 3 decades, while the Dominion had dismissed Earth as irrelevant, humanity had been building the most advanced fleet in galactic history. More than that, they had been sharing their technology with every resistance movement, every rebel group, every enslaved species willing to fight for freedom. "The rebellion reports are confirmed," Supreme Overlord reported Internal Security Chief Yexara. 17 sectors have gone dark in the last 6 hours. We're detecting energy signatures consistent with human technology on over 300 worlds. The resistance movements we thought we had crushed are rising simultaneously." Vashti's blood ran cold. The Dominion controlled nearly 2/3 of the galaxy through fear and overwhelming force. If that fear was broken, if their subjects believed they could actually win their freedom, the Empire would collapse from within. On Earth, Admiral Chen stood in the war room beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing the galaxy in revolt. Resistance movements that had waited generations for this moment were striking everywhere at once. The carefully orchestrated plan that humanity had spent decades developing was finally in motion. "Ma'am, we're receiving confirmation from the Kepler system," reported Commander Harrison. "The Thrani Liberation Fleet has successfully captured their orbital defense platforms. They're requesting additional quantum torpedoes for the assault on the Dominion garrison." Chen nodded. "Grant their request." "What's the status of the Vegan rebellion?" "The Vegans have reclaimed their homeworld using the gravitational disruptors we provided. They're already moving to liberate their colony worlds. The plant-based technology integration worked perfectly. The Dominion never suspected their own agricultural specialists were building weapons." General Rodriguez, newly promoted to lead the Coalition Support Division, stepped forward. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 14 Dominion-controlled systems. Word is spreading that we treat prisoners according to human conventions rather than executing them outright. Their forces are losing the will to fight." This had been the most crucial part of humanity's strategy. While the Dominion ruled through terror and brutality, humans had demonstrated that even enemies could be treated with dignity. Captured Dominion soldiers were fed, housed, and even offered medical treatment. Many chose to defect rather than return to an empire that saw them as expendable. Chen studied the tactical display, watching as more systems fell to the liberation forces. Each victory was carefully coordinated, with human advisors providing strategic support and advanced technology to resistance movements that had never dreamed of success. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Dominion capital. It's Supreme Overlord Vashatai himself." The main display flickered, revealing the massive form of the Dominion's supreme leader. Even through the transmission, his presence was intimidating, a creature that had ruled half the galaxy for over a century. But Chen saw something in his eyes that had never been there before. Uncertainty. "Admiral Chen of the human military," Vashtai began, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "I underestimated your species' capabilities. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation. The Dominion is prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for cessation of hostilities." Chen exchanged glances with her senior staff. They had known this moment would come, the point where the galaxy's greatest tyrant would try to negotiate rather than face total defeat. "Supreme Overlord," she replied carefully, "I appreciate your willingness to discuss terms, but I'm afraid you're negotiating with the wrong party. The Free Coalition speaks for itself now. If you want to discuss surrender, you'll need to address the representatives of every species you've enslaved." Vashtai's expression darkened. "You cannot seriously believe this rabble of primitive species can govern themselves. The Dominion has brought order to the galaxy for centuries. Without our guidance, these worlds will descend into chaos." "Funny thing about freedom," Chen observed. "Most people prefer their own mistakes to someone else's oppression. Besides, you won't be finding out personally. The Coalition has already voted on your fate." Behind Vashtai, emergency klaxons began sounding. Through the transmission, Chen could see Dominion officers running in panic as reports flooded in from across their empire. World after world was declaring independence supported by human technology and coalition forces. "This is not over, human," Vashtai snarled. "The Dominion has resources you cannot imagine. We have allies, weapons, entire species sworn to our service." Chen smiled grimly. "Actually, Supreme Overlord, about those allies, I think you should check your latest intelligence reports." The transmission ended abruptly as the Dominion capital faced its own internal uprising. The empire that had seemed invincible was discovering that their slaves had been planning their master's downfall for longer than anyone had imagined. In the depths of space, the Black Armada continued its mission. Not conquest but liberation. Every system they entered saw the chains of oppression broken, replaced by something the galaxy hadn't seen in generations. Hope for a better future. The ancient fortress world of Terminus 7th had stood unconquered for 800 years. Built into the heart of a dead star, its massive citadel housed the Dominion's most powerful weapons and their elite Praetorian Guard. It was here that Supreme Overlord Vashtai had retreated as his empire crumbled around him. Confident that no force in the galaxy could breach his ultimate stronghold, he was about to learn how wrong he could be. Captain Maria Santos adjusted her environmental suit as the UES Nightshade approached the fortress. Her ship was unlike anything else in the human fleet, a vessel built not for space combat, but for something far more dangerous. The Nightshade existed partially outside normal spacetime, capable of phasing through solid matter when necessary. Today, it would carry the most elite unit humanity had ever produced directly into the heart of enemy territory. Approaching phase shift. "Coordinates," reported her navigator, Lieutenant Kim. "The fortress's quantum barriers are exactly where intelligence predicted." Santos nodded. The Dominion believed their citadel was impregnable because it existed in a pocket dimension, accessible only through heavily defended gateways. They had never encountered a species that could walk through walls. "Ghost Team, prepare for deployment," Santos announced over the internal comm. "Remember, we're not here to destroy everything we see. Our mission is surgical. Capture the Overlord, secure the command codes, and disable their doomsday protocols. Try not to traumatize the locals too badly." In the ship's cargo bay, 24 figures in matte black armor performed final equipment checks. These were humanity's shadow operators, soldiers who had undergone genetic and cybernetic enhancement that allowed them to interface directly with quantum manipulation technology. To the rest of the galaxy, they would seem like ghosts made manifest. Team Leader Jackson, whose augmented nervous system could process information at superhuman speeds, reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Intelligence gathered from captured Dominion officers had revealed the fortress's layout and the location of the command center. More importantly, they had learned about the Overlord's contingency plan, a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems, positioned to take revenge on the liberated worlds if the Dominion fell. 30 seconds to phase shift, Kim announced. Santos watched the fortress grow larger on her screens. The massive structure was beautiful in its alien way, crystalline spires jutting from the corpse of a star like frozen lightning. It housed nearly 1 million Dominion personnel, from elite soldiers to the Empire's greatest scientists. Soon they would all discover that nowhere in the universe was truly safe from humanity's reach. Phase shift initiated. The nightshade slipped between dimensions, becoming a probability ghost that existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. To the fortress's sensors, they simply weren't there. The ship passed through the quantum barriers like light through glass, emerging in the Citadel's lower levels where the Praetorian Guard would never think to look. "Ghost Team, you are go for deployment," Santos announced. 24 shadows melted through the ship's hull and into the fortress itself. Their armor incorporated technology that humanity had reverse-engineered from studying the quantum vacuum, allowing them to exist in a state of controlled uncertainty. Security sensors couldn't detect them because, from a physics standpoint, they weren't entirely real. Jackson led his team through corridors filled with massive alien guards, past security checkpoints that scanned for threats they couldn't imagine. The Dominion had built their fortress to withstand conventional assault, but they had never prepared for enemies who could walk through their defenses without triggering a single alarm. The team split into smaller units as they moved deeper into the Citadel. Alpha Squad headed for the Central Command Center where Vashitai coordinated his remaining forces. Beta Squad moved toward the weapons control systems, tasked with disabling the Doomsday devices before they could be activated. Gamma Squad descended to the lower levels where the fortress's power core provided energy for the entire facility. Operative Chen, no relation to the Admiral, phased through a wall to find herself in the fortress's main armory. Rows of weapons designed to level planets stretched out before her, each one a masterpiece of Dominion military engineering. She began placing quantum charges at strategic points, devices that would destabilize the weapon's containment fields without causing catastrophic explosions. 3 levels above, Operative Morrison encountered his first real challenge, a Praetorian, guard captain whose cybernetic enhancements allowed him to detect quantum fluctuations. The massive alien spun around as Morrison materialized, raising a weapon that could have punched through a battleship's armor. Morrison smiled behind his helmet and activated his armor's combat protocols. To the guard, the human seemed to multiply, becoming a dozen identical figures attacking from different angles simultaneously. The aliens' enhanced reflexes were useless against enemies that existed in quantum superposition until the moment they struck. The guard fell unconscious, brought down by a neural disruptor that shut down his augmented systems without permanent damage. Morrison zip-tied the alien and continued toward his objective, leaving behind nothing but a guard who would wake up hours later with no memory of how he had been defeated. In the command center, Supreme Overlord Vashitai studied tactical displays showing the complete collapse of his empire. System after system had fallen to the Liberation Coalition, his forces either surrendering or simply abandoning their posts. The impossible had happened. A galactic empire built over centuries was being dismantled in a matter of days. "Supreme Overlord," reported his chief of staff, "the Kepler resistance has captured our main supply depot. The Vegans have taken control of their entire sector, and the humans. They're everywhere at once. Our forces can't predict their movements." Vashitai's massive fists clenched. "Activate the extinction protocol. If we cannot rule the galaxy, then no one will. Better 1,000 dead worlds than a universe in chaos." His aide moved toward the activation console, but stopped as shadows began moving in the corners of the room. The command center's lights flickered, and suddenly the temperature seemed to drop by several degrees. Something was very wrong. "Security alert," Vashitai commanded. "Scan for intruders." "Sir, sensors show nothing unusual, but the security feeds from levels 12 through 18 have gone dark." Jackson materialized directly behind the Supreme. Overlord's command throne, his weapon pressed against the alien's heavily armored neck. Around the room, the rest of Alpha Squad became visible, their weapons trained on the stunned Dominion officers. Supreme Overlord Vashitai, Jackson said calmly, by order of the Free Coalition, you are under arrest for crimes against sentient life. You have the right to surrender peacefully. Vashitai slowly turned to face his captor, his ancient eyes burning with rage and disbelief. Impossible. This fortress exists outside normal space. No force in the galaxy can breach our defenses. You're right, Jackson agreed. Good thing we're not from this galaxy originally. Now about those doomsday weapons you were planning to activate. Throughout the fortress, Ghost Team completed their mission with surgical precision. Weapons, systems were disabled, guard posts neutralized, and critical personnel captured without a single fatality. The Dominion's ultimate stronghold had fallen without firing a shot in its own defense. As the Nightshade prepared to depart with its prisoners, Santos reflected on how far humanity had come. 50 years ago, they had been dismissed as primitives playing with fusion rockets. Now they had just captured the most powerful being in known space using technology that turned the fundamental forces of reality into tools. The galaxy's old order was ending. What came next would be up to the species that had never learned how to kneel to anyone. The great assembly hall on the liberated world of Nexus Prime had once echoed with the commands of tyrants. Now, 6 months after the Dominion's fall, it hosted something the galaxy had never seen. A democratic council representing every free species in known space. Delegates from hundreds of worlds gathered to forge a new future, one based on cooperation rather than conquest. Admiral Chen walked through the massive chamber, observing the careful negotiations between species that had been enemies for generations. The Thrani delegation worked alongside former Dominion bureaucrats, finding common ground in their shared desire for stable trade routes. The plant-based vegans shared agricultural technology with species that had been forced to strip mine their worlds for tribute. Everywhere she looked, Chen saw the impossible becoming routine. Admiral, called Ambassador Kextal, the former Thrani resistance leader who now represented his species in the new coalition government. The Economics Committee has reached consensus on the trade standardization protocols. Your people's quantum currency systems have eliminated the possibility of counterfeiting across dimensional barriers. Chen nodded approvingly. Humanity's contribution to galactic governance hadn't been limited to military technology. Their economists and social scientists had spent decades studying the failures of the Dominion system, preparing alternatives that could prevent the rise of another tyrannical empire. What about the Security Council's proposals? She asked. More contentious, Kextal admitted, his reptilian features showing concern. Some species fear that without a central military authority, we'll descend into endless wars. Others refuse to accept any system that resembles the Dominion structure. This had been the greatest challenge in building the new order. How do you create peace among species that had been forced into conflict for centuries? How do you build trust when entire civilizations had been taught that strength meant subjugation? Chen made her way to the human delegations section, where Ambassador Williams was deep in conversation with representatives from the Centauri Federation. The cat-like aliens had been some of the Dominion's most reluctant subjects, conquered only a generation ago. Now they were among the Coalition's strongest supporters, their natural diplomatic skills proving invaluable in the new government. Ambassador, Chen interrupted politely, I need to speak with you about the preservation protocols. Williams excused himself from the group and followed Chen to a quieter area of the hall. Like many humans in diplomatic positions, he had been chosen for his ability to think beyond traditional human perspectives, to understand the alien mindset without losing sight of human values. The Andromedan refugees, Williams said without preamble. They've finally agreed to testify about the Dominion's extermination campaigns. The evidence they're providing will be crucial for the war crimes tribunals. Chen felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. The Andromedans had been an ancient species, their civilization spanning multiple galaxies. The Dominion had wiped them out systematically, except for a few hundred survivors who had hidden in the space between dimensions. Their testimony would help ensure that the architects of genocide faced justice, but it also revealed the true scope of the former empire's crimes. How are the other delegates handling the revelations? Chen asked. Better than expected, Williams replied. I think many species suspected the extent of the Dominion's brutality, but having proof has actually strengthened their resolve to build something better. No one wants to return to the old ways. Across the hall, a commotion drew their attention. The former Supreme Overlord Vashitai was being escorted to the witness stand by coalition security forces. The trial of Dominion leadership had been proceeding for months, with thousands of beings testifying about centuries of oppression. Today, the galaxy's former supreme ruler would face his accusers. Directly. Chen and Williams moved closer to observe as the massive alien was secured in a containment field designed to prevent escape while allowing him to address the assembly. Vashtai had aged visibly during his imprisonment, his once imposing presence diminished by the weight of his crimes. High Judge Veltara, a being from the crystal forests of Sigma Draconis, called the session to order. Her species had been among the first to fall to Dominion conquest 8 centuries ago, making her selection as chief judge particularly symbolic. Vashtai of the Dominion, the judge intoned, her crystalline voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. You stand accused of orchestrating the systematic oppression of 732 species, the destruction of 47 civilizations, and the deaths of over 2 trillion sentient beings. How do you answer these charges? The former overlord slowly raised his massive head, his eyes scanning the assembly with what might have been contempt or resignation. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had ruled half the galaxy, even though he would never do so again. I answer that I did what was necessary to bring order to chaos, Vashitai declared. Before the Dominion, this galaxy was torn apart by endless wars. Species destroyed each other over resources, territory, and ideology. I brought unity where there was division, purpose where there was waste. A murmur of anger rippled through the assembly, quickly silenced by Judge Veltara's call for order. The former Supreme Overlord continued, seemingly oblivious to the reaction his words provoked. You condemn me for the methods I used, but you cannot deny the results. For 8 centuries, the Dominion maintained peace across thousands of worlds. Trade flourished under our protection. Scientific advancement proceeded without the chaos of uncontrolled research. The strong guided the weak as nature intended. Ambassador Kexital rose from his seat, his claws extended in barely controlled rage. You call slavery guidance? You name genocide order? My people mined poison from your worlds while our children starved. Where was the peace in that? Your people lived, Vashitai replied coldly. Under my rule, the Thrani population grew by 60%. Your species would have destroyed itself in tribal warfare without Dominion intervention. I saved you from your own primitive nature. The assembly erupted in shouts of outrage, delegates from dozens of species demanding to respond to the former overlord's words. Chen watched the scene with grim satisfaction. This was exactly what needed to happen. Not just the trial of criminals, but the public rejection of the ideologies that had enabled their crimes. Judge Veltara restored order and called the first witness, an elderly Andromedan whose entire civilization had been wiped out by Dominion forces. As the survivor's testimony filled the hall with details of systematic extermination, Chen noticed something significant. The delegates weren't just angry at Vashitai. They were unified in their determination to ensure such atrocities never happened again. Admiral, Ambassador Williams whispered, look at the security monitors. Chen glanced at the displays showing the crowd outside the assembly hall. Millions of beings from across the galaxy had gathered to watch the proceedings, their species' differences forgotten in their shared commitment to justice. Former enemies stood together, united by their common experience of liberation. As the day's testimony concluded, Chen reflected on how much had changed since that first day when the Dominion fleet had appeared over Earth. Humanity had won the war, but the peace that followed was proving to be an even greater achievement. They had helped create something the galaxy had never known, a government based on consent rather than conquest, cooperation rather than domination. The trials would continue for months, ensuring that every crime was documented and every victim remembered. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the delegates working together to build a better future. Species by species, world by world, outside, the sun set over Nexus Prime. No longer the capital of an empire, but the birthplace of something far more precious. Hope for a galaxy where freedom was the birthright of every sentient being. 5 years after the fall of the Dominion, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Harmony, humanity's newest exploration vessel. Through the massive windows, she watched as the ship approached the edge of known space, heading toward galaxies that had never known the touch of tyranny or the taste of freedom. The mission ahead represented everything the Coalition had worked to achieve: peaceful contact with new civilizations, based on respect rather than conquest. The past half-decade had transformed the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. The Coalition had evolved from a desperate alliance of rebels into a thriving democracy that spanned thousands of worlds. Trade flowed freely between species that had been enemies for centuries. Scientific collaboration had produced technological advances that benefited everyone. Most importantly, children grew up knowing that their futures would be determined by their own choices, not the whims of distant tyrants. "Admiral," called Captain Foster, the ship's commanding officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth." Chen made her way to the bridge, where she found the crew preparing for humanity's next great adventure. The Harmony was unlike any vessel that had come before it. Not a warship, but a diplomatic platform, designed to explore peacefully and make contact with whatever civilizations lay beyond the galactic rim. The main screen flickered to life, revealing President Martinez in the Oval Office back on Earth. Behind him, Chen could see the flags of every Coalition member species, a rainbow of colors representing the diversity that had once been forced into uniformity under Dominion rule. "Admiral Chen," the President began, "I wanted to personally wish you good luck on this historic mission. You and your crew are carrying the hopes of every free species in the galaxy. Make us proud." "Thank you, Mr. President," Chen replied. "We'll represent the Coalition with honor." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in thoughtful silence. Everyone present understood the significance of what they were about to attempt. For the first time in galactic history, an expedition was leaving known space not to conquer or claim territory, but simply to say hello to whatever neighbors might be waiting among the stars. "Admiral," reported the science officer, Commander Park, "long-range sensors are detecting structured energy patterns consistent with advanced civilization approximately 12 light-years ahead. The signals don't match any known technology in our databases." Chen felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that came with first contact situations. Over the past 5 years, the Coalition had encountered 17 previously unknown species, hiding in the galaxy's remote regions, refugees from Dominion persecution, who had thought themselves alone in the universe. Each contact had been a reminder of how much diversity the old empire had sought to destroy. "Begin first contact protocols," Chen ordered. "Remember, we're not here as conquerors or judges. We're here as neighbors introducing ourselves." The Harmony's communications array began transmitting the standard Coalition greeting: mathematical principles, scientific constants, and cultural information designed to demonstrate peaceful intent. The message was broadcast in over 300 languages, representing every known form of communication in the galaxy. As they waited for a response, Chen reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The war against the Dominion had been won through superior technology and tactical brilliance, but the peace that followed had been built through something far more challenging: the patient work of building trust between species that had learned to fear each other. The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source: the children. Young beings from different species raised in the freedom of the post-Dominion era had none of their parents' learned prejudices. They formed friendships across species lines, collaborated on projects that amazed their elders, and demonstrated that cooperation was more natural than conflict when fear was removed from the equation. "Contact," announced Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. "We're receiving a response to our greeting. The signal isn't complex. It's going to take some time to decode." Chen nodded. First contact was always a delicate process, requiring patience and careful attention to cultural nuances. The Coalition had learned from the Dominion's mistakes, approaching new civilizations as equals rather than subjects to be catalogued and controlled. As the hours passed, the Harmony's linguists and xenobiologists worked to decipher the alien response. Gradually, a picture emerged of the civilization they had encountered, a species called the Kelthani, who had been watching the galaxy's transformation with great interest. Their messages spoke of hope that the age of conquest had finally ended, and curiosity about the beings who had made such change possible. "Admiral," Commander Park reported with barely contained excitement. "We've received an invitation to visit their homeworld. They're expressing particular interest in meeting the humans who led the liberation movement." Chen smiled. Even here, at the edge of the unknown, humanity's reputation had preceded them. Not as conquerors or tyrants, but as the species that had shown the galaxy how to break the chains of oppression. "Set course for the Kelthani system," she ordered, "and prepare the diplomatic team for formal first contact procedures." As the Harmony turned toward its destination, Chen took one last look back at the galaxy they were leaving behind. In the distance, she could see the glow of 1,000 civilizations, each one free to pursue its own destiny. The Dominion's dark age was over, replaced by an era of cooperation and mutual respect that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. The journey to the Kelthani homeworld took 3 days, during which the two species exchanged increasingly detailed communications. The aliens proved to be natural philosophers, deeply interested in the ethical and moral questions raised by the Coalition's formation. They had watched the Dominion's reign with horror, but had been too distant to intervene. When the Harmony finally entered orbit around the beautiful blue-green world of Kelthan Prime, Chen found herself facing a moment that would have been unthinkable under the old order. Here was humanity, the species once dismissed as primitive and irrelevant, serving as ambassadors for a free galaxy and making first contact with new civilizations based on principles of peace and equality. The Kelthani delegation that came aboard the Harmony was unlike any species Chen had previously encountered. Tall and graceful, with skin that shifted color to reflect their emotions, they moved with a fluid grace that spoke of evolution in low gravity. Their leader, who introduced herself as Prime Counselor Zeth Annis, greeted the human crew with what was unmistakably a gesture of respect. "Admiral Chen," Zeth Annis said in carefully pronounced Standard Galactic, "your reputation precedes you. We have heard the stories of the species that refused to kneel, that chose to stand and fight when surrender would have been easier. We are honored to meet the beings who showed the galaxy the meaning of freedom." Chen felt a familiar pride, not in human superiority but in human determination. "Prime Counselor, the honor is ours. We come not as representatives of Earth alone, but as voices for every species that believes in the right to self-determination. We hope this is the beginning of a friendship that will benefit both our peoples." As the formal ceremonies continued, Chen thought about the long journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had faced the choice between submission and resistance, and had chosen to fight for principles that transcended species boundaries. The galaxy had demanded their surrender, and they had answered with the fire of determination that burned in every free heart. Now, as they reached out to new civilizations among distant stars, they carried with them the proof that freedom was not just a human concept, but a universal truth. The galaxy would never again bow to tyrants, because its children had learned that they were born to stand tall among the stars. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and at its heart stood a species that had never learned how to surrender, teaching the universe that some things were worth fighting for and worth building together.